The ruins were silent, hidden deep in the mountains where no sunlight reached for more than a few hours a day. Stones were cracked, covered in moss, and the air smelled like dust mixed with secrets that had been kept for thousands of years. In the center of the ruined temple stood the blade. It was black as night, its edges glowing faintly as if the weapon was breathing. No one had been able to touch it. Generations of alien warriors, kings, and priests had all tried, yet the blade rejected them all. Their strongest fighters had pulled with all their strength. Their greatest sorcerers had whispered chants, but the sword stayed buried in the stone, unmoved and cold. To the aliens, it was no longer just a sword. It was a curse, a forbidden relic, and a reminder that none of them were worthy. That day, a human stepped into the ruins. He was not a soldier, not a king, not even a great leader. His name was Daniel, a lone traveler who had come from far away, following only rumors and half-told legends. His boots crushed dry leaves as he walked, his breath slow and cautious. He had never been here before, but something pulled him, like the ruins themselves wanted him inside. Around him, alien guards watched. They stood in armor that gleamed faintly under the broken roof, their faces twisted in mocking smiles. They had seen hundreds before him try and fail. To them, this human was nothing more than a weak outsider, a creature of flesh and fear, unworthy of even standing near the sword. One of the aliens laughed, a harsh, metallic sound. "Try, little human. Try, and watch the blade burn you like it did the others." Daniel ignored their laughter. His eyes were locked on the weapon. The closer he came, the colder the air felt. Each step echoed louder than the last, until even the aliens grew silent. Dust swirled at his feet as if disturbed by something unseen. He stopped before the blade. It looked both ancient and alive, its black surface shifting slightly, like water caught in stone. His heart pounded. He felt the weight of the air pressing down on him, as though the temple itself was holding its breath. He reached out a hand, slowly, carefully. His fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the strange energy radiating from the weapon. The aliens leaned forward, some sneering, others waiting eagerly for the moment he would scream and fall like all who came before. His hand brushed the hilt. For the first time in thousands of years, the blade responded. A low hum filled the temple. The ground shook. Tiny stones fell from the broken ceiling. The sword glowed with a faint red light, pulsing like a heartbeat. The air grew heavy, so heavy that some aliens staggered backward. Their eyes widened in disbelief. "Impossible," one whispered. No one has ever." Another shouted, "It's a trick! It cannot be real." Daniel stepped back in shock, his chest heaving. He had not even pulled, only touched it. Yet the weapon glowed brighter at his presence, as if it recognized him. The mocking laughter was gone. Now there was only silence and fear. One alien elder, his skin gray and wrinkled, fell to his knees. He muttered words in a tongue Daniel could not understand, words that sounded like prayer. Others hissed in anger. To them, this was wrong. This was against the natural order. The blade had always been theirs, a test for their people. For it to answer a human was unthinkable. The hum grew louder, spreading through the temple walls until it felt like the stones themselves were alive. Strange symbols carved into the pillars began to glow, one by one, filling the chamber with eerie light. Daniel's eyes darted around, confusion and fear mixing inside him. He wanted to let go, to back away, but the blade's glow pulled him in. He could feel warmth through the cold metal, like a heartbeat that was not his own. Suddenly, the ground cracked beneath his feet. A deep sound thundered through the ruins, like the roar of something waking after a long sleep. The aliens staggered, some drawing weapons in panic. Dust and light swirled upward, forming patterns in the air. Daniel looked up and saw an image take shape above the sword. A figure cloaked in shadows, holding the same blade. The vision's eyes glowed with fire. Then it vanished in an instant, leaving only silence and the pulsing sword. Daniel's hand slipped away from the hilt, but the glow remained. The weapon did not fall back into stillness. It was alive now, awake, as though waiting for him to return. He stepped back, gasping for breath, but the aliens rushed forward. Some reached for him in rage, while others dropped their weapons and knelt, believing they were witnessing the prophecy spoken of in whispers for centuries. "The outsider," one cried. "The blade has chosen the outsider." The chamber erupted in chaos. Shouts and arguments filled the air. Some demanded Daniel be killed immediately before he could claim the sword. Others swore they would follow him if the weapon truly chose him. Daniel himself stood frozen, caught between fear and wonder. He had not come to steal power. He had only followed a story. Yet now the story had become real, and all eyes were on him. The glow from the blade spread further, casting red shadows across the broken walls. Daniel could feel its pull, deeper this time, stronger. It wanted him. He could not explain how he knew, but in his bones he felt it. The weapon had waited, and its waiting was over. The aliens had failed, but for some reason, it did not reject him. His mind screamed to run, but his feet would not move. Behind him, alien guards raised their spears, torn between orders and fear. Before him, the forbidden blade shone brighter, whispering silently to him, a voice only he could hear. And with that whisper, Daniel understood one thing with terrifying clarity. Touching the blade was not the end. It was only the beginning. The temple was no longer silent. After Daniel touched the blade, the whole place seemed alive. The red glow from the weapon crawled across the cracked walls, painting everything in light and shadow. The aliens who stood guard were no longer laughing. Their eyes burned with rage and disbelief. For them, it was impossible to accept that a human, a weak outsider, had woken the sword when their strongest warriors had failed for centuries. One alien soldier pushed forward, his fangs bared in fury. "This is a lie," he shouted, pointing at Daniel. "The blade belongs to us, not to some fragile creature from another world." His voice echoed through the chamber, stirring the others. Anger spread quickly, like fire jumping from tree to tree. Spears were lifted, claws sharpened against stone. They wanted to tear him apart then and there. Daniel stepped back, his heart beating wildly. He had no weapon, no armor, nothing but the faint warmth he still felt from the sword. He had not even taken it out of the stone. But already, they wanted him dead. He looked at their furious faces and realized something terrifying. He had awakened a power that made him the enemy of everyone in the room. Among the chaos, an elder alien stepped forward. His robes dragged across the dusty floor, and his long silver eyes glowed faintly. Unlike the others, he did not shout. His voice was calm, heavy with something older than anger. "The prophecy," he said, his words cutting through the noise like a blade. Instantly, silence fell. Every alien turned toward him, even Daniel. The elder lifted a trembling hand toward the glowing sword. "The scriptures told us long ago," he continued, his voice low and steady. "The forbidden blade would never bow to our kind. It was waiting for the touch of one who was not of our blood. An outsider. A stranger. One whose heart is not chained by the hunger for power." A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Some aliens hissed in denial. Others lowered their weapons, fear spreading in their eyes. If the elder spoke truth, then what they had just witnessed was not an accident. It was destiny. "No," another warrior roared, shoving the elder aside. His scales glittered under the light as he raised his blade toward Daniel. "This is poison. This human is no chosen one. He is a thief. Kill him before he curses us all." At once, voices clashed in the chamber. Some demanded Daniel's death, shouting for blood. Others argued, warning that if the blade had truly chosen him, to kill him would be to anger forces they could not control. The sound was deafening, echoing like thunder in the temple's stone halls. Daniel stood frozen in the middle of it all. He felt small, cornered, like a rabbit surrounded by wolves. But there was something else too. The sword's glow pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, stronger with every passing second. It was as if the blade itself was listening, watching, waiting for him to decide what he would do next. The ground trembled again, dust falling from above. The temple groaned as though it was alive, responding to the argument, feeding on the chaos. One alien guard stumbled back in fear. "The temple does not like this," he muttered. His words were lost in the noise. Daniel's hand twitched toward the sword, though he did not touch it again. Just looking at it made his chest heavy. He felt a strange pull, as though the blade was whispering to him, though no words reached his ears. He did not know if it was calling for him to claim it or warning him to stay away. Suddenly, a loud crack split the air. The doors of the temple slammed shut on their own. The sound was so powerful that everyone flinched. Heavy stone ground against stone, sealing them inside. A red light flared from the blade, brighter than before, flooding the chamber until every shadow vanished. Panic spread among the aliens. Some pounded on the doors, desperate to escape. Others dropped to their knees, covering their faces. Daniel shielded his eyes from the glow, but he did not move away. He could feel the warmth of the blade, stronger now, pulsing like a living heart. It was almost comforting, even while the rest of the temple shook as if it might fall apart. One alien warrior turned toward him, his voice trembling. "What have you done, human? What curse have you brought upon us?" Daniel shook his head quickly. "I didn't do anything," he said, though his words were drowned by the roaring hum of the blade. His voice cracked with desperation. "I just touched it." The elder's voice rose again, louder this time, carrying above the chaos. "Do you not see? It is not he who has cursed us. It is we who have been blind. The blade has chosen, and we must accept it, whether we wish to or not." But the others did not listen. Fury boiled over. One soldier lunged toward Daniel with his spear raised high. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He stumbled back, his heels scraping against the cracked floor. He was seconds away from being struck down, and then the blade sang. The sound was sharp, piercing, unlike anything Daniel had ever heard. It was not from his throat, not from his mind. It came from the sword itself. The glow erupted, blasting the soldier backward before the spear could reach him. The alien hit the wall with a cry of pain, armor shattering. Gasps filled the chamber. All eyes turned to Daniel again. He had not touched the sword, but it had still protected him. That single moment silenced every voice in the temple. Fear, awe, anger, all mixed together in their stares. Daniel stood there, breathing hard, his skin glowing faintly under the blade's light. He did not understand what was happening, but the truth pressed down on him like a weight he could not escape. The blade was not finished. It had woken for him, and it would not let him go. The aliens knew it too. Their world had just changed forever, and whether they liked it or not, the center of that change was the human standing before them. The red glow from the blade did not fade. Instead, it grew brighter, pulsing in steady waves, filling the ruined temple with light. Daniel's chest tightened as the strange energy spread around him. His ears rang, and his vision blurred. The shouts of the aliens grew faint, like echoes in a tunnel. He tried to step back, but the ground beneath him seemed to vanish. In an instant, he was no longer in the temple. The world shifted, pulling him into something far older and darker. He found himself standing in a battlefield that stretched forever. The sky was blood red, and the ground was cracked with rivers of fire. Countless figures fought in the distance, their bodies huge and monstrous, their weapons clashing in endless fury. He could hear screams, the clash of steel, and the roar of creatures that did not belong in any living world. In his hands, he felt the forbidden blade, though he had not pulled it from the stone. It was warm, heavy, and alive. Daniel's heart raced. He looked around, but he was alone. There were no aliens, no temple, only this nightmare of war. He tried to let go of the weapon, but his hand would not release it. The blade pulsed again, and a voice, low and ancient, whispered inside his skull. It was not in English, but somehow he understood. "Prove yourself. Show me your spirit." The battlefield shook, and out of the smoke a creature emerged. It was taller than any human, with horns twisting from its head and claws like knives. Its eyes burned white, and it carried a jagged axe dripping with flame. Daniel staggered back in horror. He had no training, no idea how to fight such a monster. Yet the blade in his hand moved slightly, as if guiding him. His feet shifted into a stance he did not know, and his arms tightened around the hilt. The creature roared and charged. Daniel barely had time to raise the sword before the axe came down. The clash shook his bones, sparks flying into the smoky air. He almost dropped the blade, but it steadied itself, pushing back against the monster's strength. Daniel cried out, fear burning through him, yet the sword's hum grew louder, as if lending him its power. He swung wildly, clumsy and desperate, but the blade cut clean through the air with unnatural speed. The monster shrieked as the edge grazed its arm, slicing through fire and flesh alike. Daniel gasped. He had not even aimed well, yet the weapon struck true. The creature stumbled back, glaring at him with pure hatred. Daniel's breath came in sharp, quick bursts. His whole body shook, but something deep inside whispered for him to stand firm. The monster attacked again, faster this time, its axe spinning. Daniel ducked clumsily, rolling across the burning ground. Heat scorched his skin, and the smell of ash filled his nose. He scrambled to his feet, gripping the sword tighter. The blade vibrated, almost singing now, pulling his arm into motion. His strike met the creature's chest, cutting through its armor in a flash of red light. The monster roared, collapsing to its knees before crumbling into smoke. Daniel stood frozen, chest heaving. He had killed it, though he could not explain how. The battlefield shifted again, and 3 more figures emerged. Each one different, one with wings of fire, one with a shield of bone, and one that moved like a shadow. His knees weakened, despair flooding him. How could he fight again? But the blade hummed louder, the voice returning. Not strength, spirit. He clenched his teeth, raising the weapon again. The 3 rushed at him. Fear gripped him, but something strange happened. His mind grew sharper, clearer. He realized he was not meant to fight perfectly, but to endure. He dodged the winged one's strike, barely, and pushed forward. The shadow creature wrapped around him, choking him with cold darkness. Daniel screamed, swinging blindly until the blade's light burned it away. He fell to one knee, gasping, but still alive. The last creature, the one with the shield, slammed into him, knocking him onto his back. The sword slipped from his hands for a moment, landing just inches away. Panic surged in his chest. Without the blade, he was nothing. The creature raised its weapon high, ready to end him. In that instant, Daniel forced himself to crawl, there ignoring the pain, the weight of fear pressing down on him. His fingers wrapped around the hilt again, and the blade flared brighter than ever. With a desperate shout, he swung upward. The sword cut through the creature's shield as though it were paper, splitting the monster in 2. Silence fell across the battlefield. The fire rivers dimmed, and the red sky began to clear. Daniel stumbled to his feet, sweat dripping down his face, his lungs burning. The blade pulsed once more, softer now, almost approving. The battlefield dissolved, and the temple returned. Daniel collapsed to the floor, clutching his chest. Around him, the aliens stared, whispering in fear. They had seen him fall still, his eyes glowing faintly while the sword lit up. To them, he had been trapped in some kind of test. Now, as his breath came back in sharp gasps, they realized he had survived. The elder's voice was heavy with awe. The blade has tested him, and he lives. Daniel raised his head weakly, confused and shaken. He had no idea what had just happened, no idea why the sword had dragged him into that nightmare. But in his heart, he knew one thing. It had been real. The monsters, the fire, the pain, he had fought through it, and the sword had judged him worthy to stand. The aliens exchanged fearful glances. Some muttered about destiny. Others tightened their grips on their weapons, unwilling to accept what they had seen. But Daniel could feel it now, deep inside. The blade was not finished with him. That trial had only been the first step. More was coming, and the temple itself seemed to wait, holding its breath for what he would do next. The air inside the temple was heavy, as if every stone and every shadow had been holding back for centuries. Daniel was still on his knees, gripping the blade, his body trembling from the strange trial he had faced. Sweat dripped from his brow, and his breath came in rough gasps, but the sword glowed steady in his hand, humming with a power that felt endless. The aliens surrounding him did not know what to believe. Some whispered about the prophecy, their voices shaking with fear, while others only glared at him with hatred burning in their eyes. From the back of the crowd, a figure stepped forward. His armor was dark, made from bone and metal, and his eyes glowed faint yellow like a predator's. He was taller than the others, his shoulders wide, his presence commanding. This was Korak, the warlord of the northern clans, a fighter feared even among his own people. His voice was deep and sharp as he pointed a clawed finger at Daniel. "This human is no chosen one," he growled. "This is a trick. The blade belongs to our kind, and I will prove it by ripping it from his corpse." The words spread like fire. Some aliens roared in agreement, slamming their weapons on the stone floor. Others stepped back in fear, sensing something dangerous about to unfold. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. He could see the hatred in Korak's eyes, and he knew this alien would not wait for answers. He wanted blood, and he wanted it now. Korak did not give anyone time to speak. He raised his massive axe, its edge blackened by countless battles, and charged forward. The ground shook with each step, his roar filling the temple. Daniel scrambled to his feet, gripping the sword tighter, though his hands shook. He had survived the trial of visions, but this was no dream. This was real, and this enemy was flesh and bone. The first swing came fast, too fast. Daniel barely managed to raise the blade in time. The clash rang through the temple like thunder, sparks flying. The impact sent him stumbling backward, his arms burning from the force. Korak grinned cruelly, pressing forward, his strikes heavy and merciless. "You are weak," he snarled, slamming his axe down again. "The blade mocks us by choosing you." Daniel's feet slipped on the cracked stone. He ducked, rolled, barely escaping another strike that shattered a pillar beside him. Dust rained down, and the watching aliens gasped. Some cheered for Korak, their voices rising in bloodlust, while others stared at Daniel, waiting to see if the sword would save him again. The blade hummed in his grip, pulling him forward. It was not speaking with words, but guiding his body, teaching him to move. He stepped aside just as Korak's axe cut down, swung upward with all his strength, and the forbidden blade met the warlord's weapon in a burst of red light. The shockwave knocked several aliens to the ground. Korak staggered, his eyes wide in sudden surprise. Daniel felt something he hadn't before. The sword was not just protecting him, it was fighting with him. Each swing grew sharper, each block firmer. His movements were still rough, still clumsy, but the blade filled in the gaps, pushing his body where it needed to be. He was no master, but with the sword's help, he was enough. Korak roared in fury, his strikes coming faster, desperate to crush the human before his people lost faith. Daniel blocked again, sparks flying, and pushed forward with a desperate shout. His blade slid across Korak's chestplate, carving a glowing scar into the armor. The warlord howled, staggering back, fury blazing in his eyes. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some shouted Daniel's name, calling him chosen. Others screamed for his death. The temple itself seemed to tremble, the glowing symbols on the walls flaring brighter as the battle raged on. Korak's rage boiled over. He threw down his shield and raised the axe with both hands, aiming to crush Daniel completely. The swing came like a falling mountain. Daniel's instincts screamed to run, but the sword in his hands pulled him forward instead. He raised it high, bracing himself, and when the axe came down, the forbidden blade caught it. There was no sound of metal striking metal. Instead, the axe split in half, shattered as though it had been made of glass. A wave of red energy blasted outward, knocking Korak to his knees and throwing dust and rubble across the room. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Daniel stood, chest heaving, the glowing blade steady in his hands. Korak stared at him, disbelief in his glowing eyes. His broken weapon clattered to the floor. The warlord growled, his pride wounded deeper than his flesh. He tried to rise, but the energy from the sword had left him trembling. The once feared warrior was on the ground, defeated not by an alien champion, but by a human he had mocked only moments before. The silence broke with whispers. "The blade has chosen him," one alien muttered. Another dropped to one knee, bowing his head. More followed, though not all. Some still glared with rage, their pride refusing to accept the truth. Yet the sight of Korak, the strongest among them, broken and kneeling before the human, was too powerful to ignore. Daniel's arms shook. His body was exhausted, but he forced himself to stand tall, the sword steady. He did not smile, did not boast. His eyes were wide, filled with shock at what he had just done. He had not meant to fight, had not wanted to kill, yet the sword had guided him, carried him to victory against someone who should have crushed him. Korak spat blood, his voice a low growl. "This is not the end, human. You may have the blade, but you will never have our respect." His words dripped with venom, but there was fear hidden in them too. Daniel said nothing. He only tightened his grip on the weapon, feeling its pulse in his hand like a second heartbeat. Around him, the temple glowed brighter than ever, as though the sword itself was alive, declaring its choice to all. The warlord's challenge was over, but Daniel knew this was only the beginning. He could feel the weight of every eye on him, the pull of destiny he had never asked for. The blade had bonded with him, and now no one in the temple could deny it, not even the ones who hated him most. The dust from the battle had not even settled when the temple walls began to glow brighter. Strange lines of light ran through the carvings, as if the stones themselves were alive. Daniel stood in the center, his chest rising and falling, the forbidden blade still pulsing in his grip. The aliens surrounded him, silent now, their faces caught between awe and hatred. No one dared move closer. The warlord Korak still knelt on one knee, growling in humiliation. his broken axe lying useless on the ground. Then the carvings shifted. The ancient symbols that had been sleeping for centuries lit up one by one, spreading across the walls like fire racing through dry wood. The ground trembled again, and a deep rumble filled the chamber. Daniel looked around in confusion, his eyes darting from wall to wall. The glow formed shapes, figures etched into stone, moving as if alive. The aliens gasped as the carvings told their story. Long ago, a great war had torn their world apart. The blade was forged not to bring power, but to bring balance. It had been sealed away, waiting for the day it would find a bearer whose spirit was not driven by greed or conquest. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as he saw an image of a figure holding the sword. Its face was blurred, not alien, not entirely human either. But the message was clear. The chosen one would not come from among them. The elder alien stepped forward, his voice heavy with awe. "The prophecy is true," he whispered. "The forbidden blade was never meant for us. It was waiting for one who stands apart, one who fights not for glory, but for others." The crowd broke into chaos at his words. Some shouted in rage, refusing to believe. "Lies," one soldier roared. "The blade is ours by birth. This human is a thief." Another dropped his weapon, falling to his knees. "It is destiny. We have witnessed it with our own eyes. The blade is chosen." Daniel felt a chill crawl down his spine. He had not come for this. He had not wanted to be chosen. He looked at the glowing walls, at the moving symbols that spoke of sacrifice and endless struggle, and he felt the weight of their meaning. This was no gift. It was a burden, one he did not understand, one he did not know if he could carry. Suddenly, the temple doors shook violently. From outside came the sound of horns, deep and thunderous. The ground vibrated under the weight of thousands of footsteps. Daniel turned toward the entrance, his grip tightening on the blade. The elder's face grew pale. "The armies?" he muttered. "They have come." The shouting outside grew louder, echoing like a storm. Through the cracks of the great doors, Daniel could see torchlight flickering. Hundreds, no, thousands of flames. An entire host had gathered outside, waiting for the temple to open. Their chants rattled the walls. "Kill the outsider! Take the blade! Kill the outsider!" The aliens inside the chamber shifted uneasily. Some looked ready to join the mob. Others glanced nervously at Daniel, fear in their eyes. Korak rose slowly to his feet, his broken armor clinking. Blood still dripped from his wounds, but his voice was strong. "Do you hear them, human?" he growled. "They will never accept you. Even if the blade glows for you, even if the temple itself speaks your name, my people will never kneel to one such as you." Daniel's stomach twisted. He could hear the fury outside growing louder, the pounding on the doors shaking the temple. He imagined the soldiers storming in, thousands of alien warriors thirsting for his blood. He had barely survived Korak. How could he survive an army? His fingers tightened around the hilt until his knuckles turned white. The elder spoke again, his voice calm but urgent. "The prophecy warned us. The chosen one would face great trials, hunted by those who could not accept the truth. The sword does not promise victory. It promises only a chance." Daniel looked at him, his mouth dry. "A chance for what?" he asked. The elder's eyes burned with something between hope and sorrow. "A chance to change everything, to break the cycle of greed and war that has ruled our people for centuries." The pounding on the doors grew stronger. Cracks spread through the stone as dust rained down from above. The crowd inside split in two, half drawing weapons, preparing to fight Daniel themselves, the other half kneeling in silent surrender, believing he was the one foretold. The air was thick with tension, the weight of destiny pressing down on everyone. Daniel's chest heaved as he realized the truth. He had no choice. Whether he wanted it or not, the blade had chosen him. The temple had confirmed it. And the armies outside were ready to kill him for it. He could not run. He could not hide. If he turned away now, he would be crushed under their rage. The sword hummed louder, glowing brighter in his hand. Daniel felt its warmth spread through him, steadying his shaking body. He raised his head, his eyes hardening. For the first time, he spoke with a voice that carried through the chamber. "I didn't ask for this," he said, his tone sharp, echoing off the stone. "But if this blade chose me, then I won't throw it away. If I fight to protect, not to rule." The words stunned the crowd into silence. Even Korak, blood dripping from his lips, glared at him with something that almost looked like respect. though his hatred remained. The temple doors cracked again, a final blow shaking the chamber. Any moment, the armies would pour in. The glow of the blade burned hotter, wrapping Daniel in its light. He could feel it preparing him, not just as a fighter, but as something more. The elder bowed his head deeply, his voice trembling. Then, chosen one, the real battle begins now. The doors exploded inward, and the roar of thousands filled the temple like thunder. Daniel gripped the blade tightly, his heart pounding, his body ready though fear clawed at his mind. The armies had come to destroy him, but the forbidden blade was alive in his hands. And deep down, he knew one thing with terrifying certainty. This was not the end of the prophecy. This was only the beginning of it. The doors burst open with a thunderous crash, and the army outside stormed in like a flood of shadows and fire. Their weapons gleamed in the torchlight, their eyes burning with hatred. The chants that had shaken the walls now became screams of war. Daniel stood at the center of the chaos, the forbidden blade glowing in his hand like a living flame. The light poured across the broken stone, forcing the first wave of soldiers to hesitate for a heartbeat, but their rage quickly drowned their fear. The elder shouted something in his ancient tongue, but his voice was lost in the storm. Spears and axes came forward. Daniel's chest tightened as dozens of warriors charged at once. He had no armor, no shield, no training. His legs screamed to run, but the blade pulsed in his grip, pulling him forward instead of back. The first strike came from the left. He spun clumsily, yet the sword's edge met the spear before it touched him, shattering it into splinters. A roar of shock rippled through the crowd. Daniel moved again, guided more by the sword than by his own strength. Every time he swung, the blade unleashed arcs of red light that cut through weapons and armor like paper. The ground shook with each strike, dust rising in clouds. Still, for every soldier that fell, 3 more rushed forward. He could hear their voices around him. "Kill the outsider! Take the blade! Spill his blood!" His body burned with exhaustion, his arms heavy. But the blade seemed tireless. It hummed like a voice in his bones, steady and unbreakable. He dodged a spear, ducked under an axe, and struck back with desperate strength. The sword carved a shockwave that knocked 10 warriors to the ground. Sparks danced across the walls. Some aliens in the crowd froze, staring in disbelief. They had never seen such power, not even from their strongest warlords. Some dropped to their knees, whispering the word chosen again and again. But others screamed louder, blinded by rage and pride, and they pressed the attack harder. Korok, the warlord Daniel had defeated, rose to his feet from where he had fallen. His armor was broken, his weapon shattered, but his pride was not. He watched the human fight with a twisted mix of hatred and awe. For a moment, he seemed ready to join the army and crush Daniel himself, but something in his eyes hesitated. He did not raise his fists. He only watched, breathing hard, blood dripping from his chin. Daniel's chest heaved as more enemies swarmed him. He could not think. He could barely breathe. He was only moving, striking, blocking, letting the blade guide his steps. Each pulse of red light carried him further, but each moment also drained him. His legs felt like stone, his arms like fire. Sweat stung his eyes. Fear clawed at his heart. He was only one man. How long could he last? Then, suddenly, the sword changed. Instead of guiding him into strikes, it pulled him still. He stopped moving in the middle of the storm. The warriors rushed forward, screaming in triumph. But before they reached him, the blade released a wave of pure energy. A red shock ripped through the air, blasting soldiers off their feet. Armor shattered, weapons snapped, and the ground itself cracked. The temple walls shook as the light tore through everything in its path. When the glow faded, dozens of warriors lay scattered on the ground. Some groaned, others did not move at all. Silence spread for a heartbeat. Even the furious chants outside stopped. Daniel stood in the center, the blade humming softly, glowing brighter than ever. He trembled, nearly falling to his knees, but the sword held him steady, as though it had poured its own strength into him. Gasps filled the temple. Many aliens stared at him with wide eyes, their mouths open in disbelief. For the first time, they saw not a weak outsider, but something far greater. Some soldiers lowered their weapons. Some even bowed their heads. But others were not ready to surrender. Shouts rose again, desperate and furious, and more warriors pushed forward to fill the gap. Daniel's heart sank. He had fought harder than he thought possible, and still they came. He gritted his teeth, raising the blade again, though his arms shook. The elder's voice rose above the noise. Enough! Do you not see? The blade has chosen. To deny it is to deny the will of the temple itself. The soldiers wavered, torn between obedience and fury. Then, from the back of the army, a deep horn sounded. The crowd parted, and a figure stepped forward, a commander clad in golden armor, his face covered with a mask of steel. He walked slowly, with the calm of one who had seen endless wars. His voice carried through the chamber like thunder. If the blade has chosen him, then let him prove it in the only way that matters. Let him face me. The crowd roared in approval. Daniel's stomach twisted. His chest burned with fear and exhaustion, but he had no choice. He could see it in the faces around him. This was no longer about survival. This was about proving himself, proving the sword's choice once and for all. The commander drew his weapon, a massive spear crackling with strange energy. The air itself seemed to bend around its edge. He pointed it at Daniel. One duel, he declared. If the human survives, then perhaps he is chosen. If he falls, the blade is ours. Silence followed. All eyes turned to Daniel. His breath came fast and shallow, his arms shaking as he lifted the sword once more. He wanted to scream that he was no hero, that he did not ask for this, but the words would not come. The blade pulsed in his grip, steady, unyielding. It had chosen him, and now the world demanded he prove it. The crowd stepped back, forming a wide circle in the ruined temple. The torches flickered against the cracked walls. The elder bowed his head, whispering a prayer. Korak folded his arms, his expression unreadable. Daniel stood in the center, alone, facing the golden-armored commander. The forbidden blade glowed hot in his hands, whispering without words, filling his chest with both fear and fire. He knew this duel would decide everything: the sword, the prophecy, his life. And as the commander charged, the ground shaking beneath him, Daniel tightened his grip and braced himself for the fight that would either make him a legend or end him forever. The commander's steps echoed like drums of war as he circled Daniel. His golden armor gleamed under the temple's eerie red light, each piece carved with symbols of victories past. His spear crackled with blue energy, humming with deadly force. The army around them had gone silent, forming a wide circle. Thousands of eyes stared, waiting for the final proof of the blade's choice. Some looked on with hatred, others with fear, but all were hungry for blood. Daniel's hands were slick with sweat as he tightened his grip on the forbidden blade. His chest rose and fell quickly, exhaustion already gnawing at him. He had fought an army, survived visions, and defeated the warlord Korak, but this was different. This commander was calm, precise, a warrior who carried not only skill but experience. One mistake would end Daniel's life. The commander pointed his spear at him, voice calm but filled with steel. You are not one of us. You are nothing. The blade's glow is a trick, and I will end it here. Daniel swallowed hard. His voice cracked as he answered. If the blade wanted one of you, it would have chosen already. The words left his mouth before he could think. The crowd murmured, some nodding, some growling in rage. The commander's eyes narrowed behind the mask. He lowered his stance, ready to strike. The duel began with a roar of movement. The commander lunged, his spear flashing with deadly speed. Daniel raised the sword just in time, sparks flying as the two weapons clashed. The force shook his arms to the bone, sending him stumbling backward. The commander pressed forward, each strike smooth and deadly, like a storm he had controlled all his life. Daniel struggled, his steps clumsy, but the blade hummed in his hand, guiding him, pulling him into blocks and parries that saved him again and again. The crowd shouted with every clash, the sound bouncing off the broken temple walls. Dust fell from the ceiling as the ground cracked under the fighter's feet. Daniel swung with desperate strength, but the commander spun aside, his spear nearly piercing Daniel's chest. Only the sword's strange pull twisted Daniel's body away in time. His breath came in ragged gasps. The commander's calm never broke. His strikes were clean, each one aiming to end the fight. He spoke between blows, his voice like thunder. You fight like a child with a toy. This blade does not belong to you. It belongs to warriors born of this soil, not to weak flesh from the stars. Daniel clenched his teeth, fear rising with every step he gave back. His muscles burned, his vision blurred, but somewhere deep inside, anger sparked. He had not asked for this, but the blade had chosen him. He remembered the visions, the monsters, the warlord who fell, and the army he had faced alone. His voice tore from his throat, raw but steady. The blade belongs to whoever will use it to protect, not destroy. The words seemed to awaken something inside the weapon. It glowed brighter than ever, its hum turning into a steady roar. Daniel swung, and the sword released a burst of red energy, forcing the commander to leap back. The crowd gasped as the commander's golden armor cracked slightly under the light's touch. For the first time, he looked shaken. He snarled and rushed forward, spinning his spear with deadly grace. Sparks of blue energy clashed with Daniel's red light, filling the temple with blinding flashes. Every strike shook the ground, sending tremors through the stone. Daniel screamed with effort, his body nearly breaking under the weight of each clash. The blade guided him, but it was his will that kept him moving, his refusal to give in that kept his legs standing. The final strike came like lightning. The commander lifted his spear high, energy swirling around it, and brought it down with all his strength. Daniel raised the forbidden blade with both hands, every muscle screaming. The two weapons met in a clash that split the air apart. The explosion of light blinded everyone. The shockwave shattered pillars, cracked the floor, and threw soldiers off their feet. For a moment, there was nothing but dust and silence. When the air cleared, the crowd saw the truth. The commander was on his knees, his spear broken in two, his golden armor split across the chest. His mask had fallen, revealing his face twisted in disbelief and pain. He tried to rise, but the forbidden blade glowed above him, steady in Daniel's trembling hands. The commander lowered his head. He did not speak. He knew he had been defeated. The crowd gasped, then fell into silence. No one moved, no one spoke, as the truth settled like a storm. Daniel's chest heaved, his body shaking with exhaustion, but he forced himself to stand tall. He did not raise the sword in triumph. He did not smile. His voice, weak but clear, carried through the ruins. I don't want to rule you. I don't want your throne. But if this blade chose me, then I will use it only to protect those who cannot fight for themselves. That is all. Silence lingered, heavy and unbroken. Then, slowly, the elder dropped to his knees. Others followed, one by one, their weapons clattering to the floor. Even some of the soldiers who had shouted for his death bowed their heads, accepting what their eyes could no longer deny. Not all bent the knee. Some turned away, faces twisted with hate, unable to accept the choice of the blade. But the temple glowed brighter, its carvings burning like fire. The prophecy had been fulfilled before them all. Daniel lowered the blade, his arms weak, his body nearly collapsing. He had not asked for this destiny, yet it had found him. The whispers of the sword filled his mind again, softer this time, almost gentle. He knew this was not the end. The true burden had only just begun. As the dust settled and the defeated commander bowed his head in silence, a new legend was born in the temple that day. The forbidden blade had chosen at last, and it had chosen a human.